Hi, in this video we'll try to create 6 measures. We'll try to calculate the new shapes, repeat shapes, lost shapes and their lists. And prior to that we have to understand a couple of functions. One is except, which removes the rows of table B from the table A, and also another function which we are going to use in our measures is intersect, and intersect performs the set intersection between two tables. Meaning the intersection values from both the sets are shown. And like I said, we are going to create 6 measures: new shapes and list, lost shapes and list, and number of repeat shapes and list. Many people have done this, like they calculate new orders, new customers, and other areas. So this is something which I thought we'll use it in our use case. We'll try to use it in our UFO Sightings Dataset. So let us quickly look at the data. We are looking at the UFO sightings table in the table view. As you can see, there are several columns, and we are interested in finding out, looking at the shapes and also the year. We want to see, in case most of the time some of the shapes appear in a year. That is what based on the observations from people. They say that they saw a certain particular shape, and we want to see by year if there are any like missing or lost shapes, right? Not all shapes appear in a year. So I thought I'll just look at that. And once we understand that, let us try to go to model view and look at the model. Like I said, there are two datasets. We have your UFO sightings dataset, which has a relationship with the calendar table, and there is another dataset which is a Places CSV. I will leave the link to the datasets in the description box below, and there are several columns in Places too. For now, we are not worried about the Places dataset, but we will try to look at the UFO sightings dataset. Like I said, let us try to calculate the new shapes and lost shapes and repeat shapes and their lists. So let us try to go to Dax Query view like we always do. Let us try to start typing the code. Now let us start by getting the distinct values of shape. So that way we'll know what are the distinct shapes in our dataset. So once we use this variable and calculate values, because this is what we are trying to do something in the Dax Query view just before we kind of create the measure, so that we can here itself we can see the result, right? Some of them we can run and see. Say for example, current shapes, we run this code on the below tab area. We can see that there are about 25 shapes. That is what we understand from the dataset. There are 25 distinct shapes. So now that that is out of the way, like I said, we want to calculate what are the new shapes based on the year, right? Year by year. So we want to see if there are any new shapes appearing in a year. So let us try to create another variable. Let us call it as current shapes, and again we'll pass the values. We'll use the values function and pass the shape column, and that way we will try to get the current shapes. Let us run this, and obviously when you have that current year variable, we have to wrap that in a table constructor. So once we see this, the minimum, we know that briefly when we saw the table view, we know that the minimum year is 1925. So like I said, we have created current shapes variable and also current year. Now that these two are there, we'll try to create another variable, and we'll call it as prior shapes. And once we have that, we'll try to use calculate table, and for the table we will use that values function and pass the shapes column. So that is the first parameter which the calculate table expects, and the expression we will try to add. We'll try to wrap all function around the calendar table year, so that all those things are whatever we need are there. And second is we will try to use a filter condition for the calculate table. We'll say, hey, calendar year table year should be less than or equal to current year. Current year we have already defined above as the minimum of the year. So once we run that, sometimes we might get results, sometimes we do not. But the main reason we are using Dax Query view is that we have to understand the logic, so that before we create any measure, we'll know what exactly we are trying to calculate. So once we run, obviously there is nothing here because there is we are not using any year. Once we use the table visual, when we use the year in that, those values will appear. So once we are done with this, let us try to create another new shapes variable, and let us try to use the except function. As we've already seen, it returns the rows of the left side table which do not appear in the right side table. So let us try to pass the first table. The left table will be the current shapes and the right table will be your prior shapes. Once we do that, we have a new variable, new shapes. So again, like I said, we will try to run it and see what happens here. We are trying to understand how our measure is showing, right? So once we run this, we got all those shapes. So that is good and good step. So once we have this logic behind us, let us try to count the new shapes. Obviously, we need to wrap this on inside a table constructor so that we can see that in Dax Query view, and we get the count. So we got the shapes 25. And also we got the count. So now that this is we are ready, so let us try to copy that and create a new measure. We'll call it as new shapes, so that once we have that number of new shapes count, we can use a table visual. We'll pass here and also try to drag this new measure which we just created. I've already created, so to save time, so I've just used the same code from here and created a new name measure as number of new shapes. Similarly, we can, now that we have done that, the same logic will extend. We'll try to grab those values. Right, we need the shape names, right? So we're going to use the same thing, but except here we are going to use concatenate x. We'll try to use the gap list table and concatenate with the shape. So once we do that, and we'll try to run it again, and once we do that, we should get the shapes list, right? So let us try to wrap that around a constructor, and let us see. Okay, curly braces, closing curly braces, we got the cube. So since the max is 2023, looks like in 2023 there was a new shape which appeared, which is cube. So now that we have this, we can just go ahead and create the new shape list measure. So like I said, I'm just trying to use Dax Query view so that it will be easy for us to create the measure. So I've created the measure already, same code, dragged that onto the table visual, and you have those shapes. So we have the count, the second column, and the third column, it is telling you what are the new shapes. Like for example, it says in 1930 two shapes which are NA and ARB. Similarly, like just we have seen in 2023, cube is the new shape. So perfect. I think looks like our code is working. And let us move forward and try to create other measures. Like I said, we are going to create 6 measures. So we are going to create another we are going to write another code here. We'll call it as number of lost shapes. Ultimately, we're going to define that measure. But here the logic is that we want to go back to the previous years, right? If you see that, we have from the max calendar, the expression, we have filter expression. We gave max calendar year -1. That way we get the previous years thing, and we count it. We obviously, like I said, we don't get anything. So we created a measure out of it, same code, dragged onto the table visual, and we have those number of lost shapes. So we have the lost shapes. Again, since we know the drill, we have created the previous 3 measures. So we are going to use the same measure, whatever code we have created for number of lost shapes, and we will try to get a list of the shapes, right? It makes sense. For example, we here in this case, we need to get those like you see here, the lost shapes are 2, NA and ARB. Like in 1942, you see rectangle and unknown, those are the shapes which were there. And which we are missing in 1943. So that logic, I think it is working out. So all we need to do is grab those shape names. So let us try to create another measure. Quickly look at the code in the Dax Query view, and once we look at the code, like I said, we are going to grab those shape values names. So this is the code. and only thing is the line 11 changes. We are going to use concatenate x. We are going to concatenate gap list values with the shape value with a comma delimiter. And once we do that, we create a shape out of it, a measure out of it, and we'll call it as lost shapes list. And again, I created that measure to save time, and I drag that onto the table visual on the report page. Once we have that, we have the list. For example, like I said, we have seen in the previous couple of seconds ago that those are the shapes, new number of shapes and new shape list. And also it is saying that, hey, number of lost shapes. It says light was not a shape which was seen in 1929. Similarly, if you go to some other year, say for example, if you go to 1930, there are two new shapes which appeared, NA and ARP, and those are missing in 1931. I think our logic is working pretty nicely. We have calculated we created 4 measures, new shapes and list, and lost shapes and list. So let us move forward. Let us try to create, now that we have both of them, it's pretty easy for us to calculate the repeat shapes. So this is the logic behind it. You can pause the video and look at the code. And it's pretty easy to understand, not much of complicated. We are trying to get the prior shapes in that variable and use the intersects to get the repeat shapes, and the count raise those rows of the repeat shapes table, so that we will get the number of repeat shapes. So once we get that, we define this measure, we create the measure again, drag it on to the table visual. We should get the count of those numbers, right? So those are the number of lost shapes, number of repeat shapes, right? So number of repeat shapes, drag it onto that. So we have our 5th measure ready. So repeat shapes we have counted. So once we have this, it's pretty easy for us to calculate, trying to grab the value name of the shape values, so that we get those shape names too. So the same kind of logic, except in the last line we are going to use concatenate x, and we concatenate repeat shapes table, and also grab the shape column from our UFO sightings table, comma delimiter. And once we do that, again I created the measure to save time, so I've dragged that onto the table visual now. So once we do that, that shape is also there. We have the repeat shapes list available too. So there are, the table visual looks a little bit crowded, obviously, because we have so many measures, but I thought in a single table visual we can see all those things. We have calculated new shapes and the list, and lost shapes and the list, and repeat shapes and the list. So I think this looks good. At least we are able to understand. If someone is trying to ask research question, hey, what are the new shapes, what are the lost shapes, what are the repeat shapes, we will be able to use this kind of methodology. There, like I said, there are several methods a lot of people have done. In case if your data set is something else, you can use the same kind of code methods, or maybe improve on this. I've created a new report page, and I've added the text slicer and also the new card visual, and I've used those three values for the new card visual: total sightings, date of first sighting, and date of last sighting. And once we use the text slicer and try to enter in the name in that particular text slicer, any country, these values in the table visual will also change. So I thought if this is kind of an additional thing, we add those two things up there, so that if somebody is entering the name, say for example here you can enter the name, say Brazil, and once you enter the name Brazil, you will see on up top what are the total sightings overall in Brazil, 78 sightings, and the first sighting is 1957. So you need to scroll down on the table visual and see that, hey, in 1957 the first sighting, and that was a light, probably that was lost shape also it is showing what is the value, and also number of lost shapes and repeat shapes. So this is a very simple thing. You can, in case if you're following along, you can try to look at pause the video and look at those values. I'm thinking that those values are correct. And similarly, if you change the name again to USA, select USA, And once you have USA, you can see that 88,213 are the total sightings, and minimum and first date of sighting and last date of sighting are shown here, and also the repeat shapes are also shown. I mean, all those 6 measures which we have created, those things also are changing. You can scroll down the table visual and you can see that those values are changing. I think so far so good. And also, if you see on the right, I have created some folders within the measures table, like sightings, timeline, shapes, moving and average, and miscellaneous. So I think it's pretty easy to use folders so that even the measures table looks good. So we can classify and kind of put everything into different buckets. So for example, if you have total sightings and you can just drag it into miscellaneous, you can create the display folder name up there and probably look it up. You can easily create folders, look up the documentation. It's pretty easy, or maybe I'll cover in a future video. I created those folders and separated those measures into each and every folder. So I think in concluding this video, I think we have created 6 measures, and we have looked at what are the new shapes and lost shapes and repeat shapes. I think this is a good way of getting insights from the dataset. So thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.